Okay, so here's the big question, Sabra. What does the divorce process actually look like? How long does this process usually take? What fees should they anticipate? What's the role of mediation and when does that work best? What is the difference between a contested and uncontested divorce? Wow. Just stay married, people. Final lessons.
Oh, no, with my tears in my eyes.
No, just not like this is a divorce attorney who believes in marriage very strongly. I love that. Speaking of children, what can people do to protect their kids during a split? This is good stuff. Sabra, really good stuff. Welcome to StreetSmarts MBA, the podcast where we teach you how to be an adult. I'm your host, Yaffa. Today's episode is a big one. Whether you're single, engaged, married, or somewhere between I do and I don't anymore, this one's for you. We're talking about marriage, divorce, and everything in between, including what you need to know before walking down the aisle and what to do if you're already thinking about walking away. Today's guest is someone who brings not only legal expertise, but deep compassion and clarity to one of life's most difficult transitions, divorce. Sabra Sasson is an attorney and divorce mediator based in New York City and the founder of Sabra Law Group, PLLC, a practice focused on mediation and family litigation. With a background in mathematics and education from Brandeis University and a law degree from Hofstra, she's licensed in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and has been practicing law for over 2 decades. Sabra works with clients facing big life challenges, from marriage planning to prenuptial agreements to divorce, custody, and support modifications. After experiencing her own painful divorce, she created what she now calls the harmonious divorce system, helping couples transition with less stress and more empowerment. Her approach is grounded in giving clients control and dignity as they move through major life transitions. She's also a published author, contributing to books such as The Entrepreneur's Success from the Heart, with her chapters titled Dream a Different Dream, and Onward and Upward, a guide for getting through New York divorce and family law issues, where she contributed chapters in real estate, parenting classes, and prenups. Her own book, The Harmonious Divorce, is on the way soon, and I can't wait. And knowing how in demand she is, I am truly honored to have her here with us today. This is the episode you don't want to miss. Sabra, welcome to StreetSmarts MBA. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you, Yaffa. I'm so happy to be invited here. Thank you so much.
So Sabra, please tell us, what got you into this field in the first place?
So that's a great question. The short answer is my own divorce. I never would have considered family law or divorce or custody law until having gone through my own divorce many, many years ago. I was already a practicing attorney by the time I had met him. And so when I went to law school, my plan actually was to become a trust and estates attorney. I wanted to help families protect and preserve their wealth, pass it on from generation to generation, all their hard work, legally pay whatever taxes they needed to, but, protect and preserve as much as they could. That was my plan. And when I went to law school, one of my professors had shared with me that if I wanted to do estate planning, I needed to know tax law. So I took federal individual income tax, and I was in love because it was a merger of law and math, and I was a math major. You had mentioned that earlier on in my bio. I was a math major in college, and so it kind of merged my love of math with law, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to become a tax attorney. And so after the bar exam, when I was applying for jobs, I found a job with a tax lawyer, and I worked there for a little while, but I just didn't love it. I'm not sure if I didn't like the job or I just didn't love the area of practice. And I wound up leaving to work with a entertainment lawyer where I got exposure to a lot of different areas of law, and ultimately I landed in real estate as a real estate attorney, and I did that for quite some time. I was in-house to a real estate developer, and then I wound up working at a law firm. And during my time there, I had met somebody, we dated, fell in love, got married. and divorce, all while I was working at that law firm. And so after my experience going through my divorce, which for me was very traumatic, I decided to refocus my energies on other places because I became a lawyer to help people. I wanted to help as many people as possible. And if I could help anybody get through a divorce and not have the nightmare divorce I went through, then that would make me so happy. So that's how I stumbled upon family law and divorce law. And the irony is most of my clientele is men. So I'm doing a lot of men's advocacy. And we're advocating for their rights as a parent, for their rights to have custody of their children. There's just so many fathers out there who are just fighting to see their kids or spend time with their kids and have a relationship with their children. And it's just so challenging for them. They also have challenges with respect to child support and spousal support. And, we're advocating for them in that arena as well.
Wow.
So while we do represent women, most of our clientele do happen to be in the men's space. And I really enjoy giving them a voice. And it really gives me such pleasure and pride, when I can reconnect one of my fathers with their children again that they hadn't seen in a long time, or they were only getting to see them one day a week and now they're getting to see them every weekend. And so it's just so amazing that I could help people reunite with their kids again.
Wow, that's so special. You're like social worker and everything else all in one. Is there something that you wish you knew before you even got married?
I think that there's things in the personality that are really important to be aware of. If you're, especially at the beginning of a relationship, you may notice that somebody's love bombing. Those are some red flags. Or if somebody is being overly, generous to you, or maybe financially, I've seen situations or heard of situations where people are asked if they can borrow money from their partner early on in the relationship. Those are also some red flags. You've probably heard, I don't know if it's so common, but I talk a lot about it with my friends. If you're going out to a restaurant and your person that you're on a date with doesn't treat the other people around you, the waiter, the other staff, with grace and kindness, those are also things to pay attention to. Are they kind to you and then they get angry or mad? Do they have a short temper? These are things to pay attention to. I'm not necessarily saying that they're deal breakers, but certainly something to be aware of. Maybe, it's also, I just saw the show Gaslighting. So gaslighting is another thing to be aware of if somebody's, finding a way to blame you for things. Well, one of the things that I wish I had considered before I got married was getting more clear about what his vision was for marriage. I thought we had talked about these things, but I didn't really dive in deep with him about a long-term vision. We talked very surface level when I look back on things about that. I had certain ideas of how our finances would be managed and whatever, but we hadn't spoken about that before we got married. So it was very I don't know, I guess I was just hoping that things would just work out, or that, I guess when people get married, you kind of just figure it out together. And I thought it would work out if you're with the right person. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't with the right person, or he was definitely not of the same mindset as me. I had the idea that, okay, we're both working, we're going to contribute our funds to a joint account, and we'll just manage all of our finances together, and that would be the end of it. Little did I know he had no intention of doing that, so that kind of threw a monkey wrench into things right from the beginning. Before marriage, I was not a proponent of prenuptial agreements, and since my divorce, I'm a very big proponent of prenuptial agreements. I know a lot of people think, oh, if you're thinking of a prenup, you're already planning for your divorce, and I definitely don't feel that way now. I feel that if my ex and I had spoken about money and finances and our ideas about how to manage finances together, I think it would have revealed a lot. Maybe we would have worked things out. I don't know. And then we would still be together. But if we weren't able to work things out, it would have revealed a lot as well. And that would be okay. It would have saved me a lot of heartache and a lot of pain and the trauma of going through a divorce. So I love helping people now, get to navigate and talk about how they want to stay in control of their assets and their money, and how they want to share things together with each other. I think it helps people got comfortable talking about an uncomfortable topic. Like, people don't talk about money and finances in New York, and certainly I don't think in America, I could probably safely say. And having a prenuptial agreement or talking about the idea of a prenup, again, it's not for everybody. But I think just discussing the possibility of a prenuptial agreement, what it means for each of you, whether you need one or don't want one. There's so many different reasons why people would do one. But in my circumstance, I kind of wish that I had gone through the effort of a prenup with him. Like I said, maybe we would still be together today, or maybe it would have revealed that we were really very different when it comes to managing our finances. So I don't know what would have been, because I didn't do it.
So when a young couple gets together, they don't generally have a lot of assets. How would the conversation about finances even start?
Yeah, so I think that when you're dating somebody, at first you're trying to get to know them, see if you like them. Hopefully you're having a good time enjoying their company. If you see that there's going to be a future, potential future with this person, it's a great time to start talking about money, or how do people manage their finances, paying attention to that. I remember, if I can be a little bit personal, I had a boyfriend a long time ago, and on one of our dates, he took me to a mall, which is fine. But one of the things that we did at the mall is he used one credit card to pay off another credit card, which I thought was very odd. But that gave me a lot of insight into how he manages his finances. So, for me, that wasn't how I managed my finances, and that certainly was a flag for me. There were other reasons why things didn't work out with him, but I think that it's important to understand, are you a saver? Are you a spender? Do you pay your bills on time? Are you late? What kind of credit score? Because that could impact a lot of things in the future. If you're planning to buy a home someday or take out a mortgage, how are you going to be able to do that if one of your credit scores in the toilet and the other one has stellar credit? It may be that only one of you can apply for the mortgage, and may limit your availability or the possibility of getting financing and purchasing a home together in the future, if that's something that you want to do. There's a lot of different reasons to talk about money. Unfortunately, marriage isn't just about love. I think that movies sensationalize love and marriage, and I think love is beautiful and that's wonderful, but the practicality is that I learned the hard way is that finances are a big part of that. So when two people get married, you're not just marrying for love, but you're also entering into a financial arrangement with that person. Whether you realize it or not, you'll realize it soon after, kind of like after my marriage. One of the first questions that I asked, or that came up after our honeymoon, was, who's paying for the rents? How is that going to be taken care of? These were things we hadn't spoken about, these things, before we got married. And I moved into his apartment. So to me, I thought that he would continue paying his bills because I moved into his home. But we had very different ideas as to how that would work out. And we started talking about them then. I think it would be better to talk about these things ahead of time.
Wow. Yeah, I wouldn't even think to ask those questions.
Right.
What about student debt? Is that something that we should be also aware of?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Knowing what kind of debt that your partner is coming into the relationship with, again, depends upon what you're planning to do. If you're planning on renting, it may or may not have an impact. I guess if they're late in their payments, their credit won't be good. The landlord might not accept you guys into an apartment. If you're planning to buy a place, if you already have debt, that'll limit your ability to borrow more, right? So you have just so much ability to borrow based upon your credit score and your credit history. If you were previously married and you were paying child support or spousal support, that's also factored in to the calculation as to whether you can afford the mortgage. I would imagine that the banks want to know about these things.
Wow, amazing points. Speaking of prenups, okay, so you have two people going into marriage. Both of them are fresh out of grad school or whatever, college. They don't have many assets. What is there to have a prenup about?
Great question. So from my perspective, the way that I see prenups is when you get married, whether you like it or not, you already in a way have a prenup, and it's called the state statute where you live. In New York, it's called the domestic relations law. And what I mean by that is if, God forbid, there's a breakup in the future, the domestic relations law will apply to how your finances are going to be divided. Now, you may or may not like the laws of your state and how it's going to divide the assets. And New York is a separate property state and a marital property state, as opposed to other states like California as a community property state. I really don't know much about community property, but I do know very much about marital property in New York. And so my opinion and my beliefs around the prenup is that rather than leaving it to the state to decide what happens with your stuff, you take more control and ownership over your stuff and decide with your partner when you're most in love and you're planning your life together, what do we think is fair? It's not about planning for a future breakup. It's a matter of defining what is, like, whatever I'm coming into the, for instance, here's an example. So you may have a bank account, maybe your family gave you money over the years or grandparents gave you birthday money and you saved it in a savings account before you got married. So in New York, all that money prior to the marriage is separate property. But if you get married and then the next day get a paycheck and you deposit into that bank account, you've now done something called commingling. So now that entire account is all marital property. It's no longer separate property. But in a prenuptial agreement, you could say, no, what I came into the marriage with is separate and I get to leave with it as long as we don't spend it. I can leave with it if things don't work out. Unfortunately, if you don't do a prenuptial agreement and then you carry on life, most people don't know or think to open up a brand new bank account after they get married so that they have all their marital stuff marital and the separate stuff separate. And so it complicates things when you get divorced and now you find out all those assets and all that money that you saved up for all those years before you got married, whether you're 20 years old and getting married or 50 years old and getting married for the first time, you may wind up unknowingly or unwittingly essentially giving half of your stuff to your partner, which may be fine. Like if you guys spend the rest of your lives together and somebody passes away during the marriage, you're okay with that. But maybe if the marriage lasts only a few months or a couple of years, you might feel a little bit differently about parting with especially assets that you accumulated before you even knew each other.
Wow. So during this prenup, do you have to disclose all of your assets to the partner so they would know everything that you have and you would know everything that they have?
Absolutely.
Really?
I think that would be part of something that you would want to know about each other. Some families, there may be a trust or there may be family money that somebody's parents may be giving to them at some point in their lifetime, whether it already happened or it's going to happen, or maybe there's an estate that may come to them in the future, inheritance. These are things that, again, could influence or affect what your life plan is with your partner. Now, there may be things that they're willing to share, or they may say it's family money and my parents want to make sure that, I mean, God forbid things don't work out, you know, my parents want to keep this money within the family, not necessarily give it to the future, you know, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, which they may not have anything against, but if things don't work out in the relationship, they want to keep it within the family. So that's a reason to have a prenuptial agreement. People do that a lot here in New York. Other common reasons that I see are people who are, this a second time being married, so maybe they already went through a divorce and they know how expensive it is. Having a prenuptial agreement would make things a bit easier with the division of assets. It's already spelled out, right? So you get this, I get that. This is how support will work if we get divorced. So it's a one-time event. You doing a prenuptial agreement, you're paying for it once. I like to tell people it's your insurance policy against divorce, because again, when I'm talking with my clients, I'm talking with them about how to have the conversation with their partner, because it's an agreement. They're negotiating with each other through their attorneys. And when there's a tough question or a tough issue that needs to be addressed, I talk with my client about what it is, what does this mean, what are the impacts, what are your concerns, and then I have them go home and talk with their partner about this and come back with a plan, like, okay, this is where we're comfortable, this is what we want, and that's great, because if they're getting comfortable talking about money with each other, it lays the groundwork for the future when other financial issues come up. Because think about it, you ever have a fight with a friend and like it's the same fight like over and over and over again? So the same thing here. If you establish a healthy way to talk about money or resolve conflicts around money, they're more likely to have a similar conversation in the future, and the marriage is more likely to be successful.
So during this prenup, they would have to know the specifics of what's in that account.
Oh, so in terms of answering that question, there's a disclosure obligation. So if you don't disclose an asset and now all these terms and all these agreements are made, and then later on it's discovered that there is, I don't know, some other major asset out there. I know people talking about Bitcoin these days. I see that a lot in the schedule of assets that's exchanged. So if people didn't know about it, maybe they wouldn't have made certain agreements that are made in the document had they known about this other asset. So maybe they would have given up things, or they wouldn't have given up things, or they would have asked for something else that they felt was fair. And so, yes, there needs to be a full disclosure of all the assets that exist. I even have clients disclosing if they're potential beneficiary of a trust in the future, and they'll disclose that information as well.
Okay.
The other concern, if you don't list a particular asset as separate property, that's essentially what you're doing when you're disclosing what your current assets are. You aren't married yet. So this is all premarital assets. So technically, God forbid there was a breakup, your separate property is your separate property. You get to leave the marriage with them. If you don't disclose it, and now it's 15, 20 years later, and now you're claiming, well, this asset is my separate property, like I had it at the time. Well, you didn't disclose it. It's not on the list. How do I know? And so now it's 15 or 20 years later, hypothetically. How are you going to prove it? How many people actually maintain and keep copies of their statements going that far back? And so if you don't have copies of it or proof that it existed before the marriage, the obligation is on the person claiming that it's a separate property asset. If you don't have proof of that, then the presumption is that it's marital. And so if you want something to be protected and preserved, that's another reason for the full disclosure.
Wow. Just stay married, people. Okay. What's the biggest misconception people have about marriage? Is that a loaded question?
It's just a tough question because I go to my own situation where, to me, I'm kind of feel like I'm in that group of people, this misconception that it's all about love and romance and it's going to continue that way. And, the reality is when the honeymoon is over, you're back to normal life. And normal life involves grocery shopping and laundry and running errands and going to work and paying your bills. So it's not so exciting every day. And I think that people forget that life can be a bit mundane at times. It's not always so exciting. And I also think that there's an obligation to keep the love alive and keep things exciting. And I think people kind of get caught up in the rut of just life, daily life. And if I can go off for a second, there's a very religious family that I know, and every now and then I hear from the husband because we know each other from a former job position that I used to hold a long time ago. And I always was fascinated because he's so religious, but he so loves his wife and his family. And I would always ask questions like, how do you keep the love alive and how do you keep it interesting? And he has date nights with his wife every single week. And he makes sure that the kids know that mommy and daddy have their date night and they're not to interrupt the parents, whether they stay at home and have their date night at home, like whether they're sitting in the kitchen and talking, or they leave the home and, I don't know, go out and do something. And I thought that was so wonderful. And that's something, for me, I would love to take into a future relationship. And so I think that people, they work so hard at the relationship when they're dating, and they think that that stops. You don't need to put in that same effort after you're married. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes.
Thank you. Okay, so you got married and everything is hunky-dory. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, something doesn't feel right, and I think I made a mistake and I'm not happy anymore. So if someone is considering divorce, what would you suggest to someone who's going through that thought process?
That's always such a tough question, and especially the way that you set it up, because I don't know anything about, what happened in the relationship. I'm a big believer in, you guys made a commitment to each other, to love, cherish each other in sickness and health, till death do us part. I really believe in all of that. And so to me, I think there's an obligation to the relationship, not just to yourself, to the relationship, to try to work things out or, communicate and talk with your partner, share that you're unhappy. And I'm talking in a healthy situation. Clearly, if there's abuse of any sort, whether it's physical, emotional, verbal abuse, financial abuse, there's all different types of abuse out there. I don't think abuse is okay in any circumstance. Short of that, I think that you owe it to the relationship to try and to communicate with your partner your level of discomfort, or you're not happy and something has changed. And one of the things that I share with people is maybe certain conversations shouldn't be at home. Perhaps you need to go on a date night or go for dinner with your partner, not in your typical favorite restaurant, but just someplace else, and also not in the home, because the home to me should be a loving place. You come home, you're happy to be home. It's your safety net. It's like you just feel safety and secure at home. And if you're going to have a tough, difficult conversation with your partner, perhaps even if you go to the local park and sit in a park bench, or maybe in a way that you could face each other, and talk with each other and to each other, I think that would be a better place to have that, something serious, so you can actually have the time and the space to talk about things that are on your mind, and also go with an open mind. Go with the understanding that you're there not only to share your point of view, but to hear their point of view. And you might not be okay with their response, but you can hear their thoughts. You don't have to agree with it. You can acknowledge it and try to see if there's some way that you can work on things or make things better, or get back to a place where you were both happy. And if you can't do that together, perhaps it may be time to bring in a therapist or a coach, a life coach, or some other professional who can help you have those conversations if you can't have them together. Some people kind of forget how to communicate, and there's a lot of really great therapists who can help you with communicating better, expressing yourselves. Maybe you just can't find the right words, or you say the words, but somehow it's not landing okay with the other side. The other person's taking offense to every single thing that you say, but it's not exactly what you meant. So sometimes you need that professional to help you find those right words or phrases so that you can be heard and you can hear your partner. Going through life, like, you see people in their marriages and their relationships, and you talk to people or family members, maybe aunts or uncles, and you see, like, okay, everybody seems all happy, but then when you get to know them a little bit better, you know that they've had some disagreements here or there. And you may ask your grandparents, you see those interviews, how did you guys make it through 70 years together, or whatever it was. I don't think that life is a straight path. I think that there are ups and downs, there are challenges in life. Individuals go through challenges in life. Maybe there's health scares. Maybe somebody had an accident. Maybe they got downsized at work. Like, all these unexpected things. But if you made a commitment to build a life with someone, you're building a life with them no matter what life throws at the two of you. And isn't it so much better that you can do it together and get through that together, rather than imagine you were on your own and faced with those similar challenges? I'm a big believer in that, but usually they're not calling to hear that from an attorney. Usually when people are calling me, they've already decided that they want a divorce.
So what do they need to have prepared before they bring up this conversation with their spouse?
So again,
legally.
Right. So
financially.
Legally, if it's something that's been gradual, it's been building up for a while, they've been seeing a therapist for a while, okay, they know if it's going to work out, not work out, they kind of have an inclination or an idea. So in those circumstances, what they can do is to start preparing is, I don't know who's going to move out, but if you're the person who's going to move out, you're going to want to take certain important documents with you. Certainly you want to make sure that you have access to all the financials with respect to the marriage and the relationship. You'll take your passport, and other important documents. I had a situation with a client who didn't take a particular computer home from the house, and I don't want to disclose what it is, but they were using a particular type of, I guess, program, for lack of a better way of describing it, and everything that they did on their phone and any other device was able to be seen by their spouse. And it became a huge problem in their divorce proceedings, and we couldn't turn it off or figure out how to disconnect that, because he had no control over that device anymore. He wasn't home anymore. So, these are the things that you don't think about, that only, I guess, through experience you figure out that need to be thought about. One of the first things I suggest or recommend to my clients is change your passwords on everything.
Wow.
Bank accounts, email addresses, social media. You really want to make sure that your partner can no longer have access to some, because some partners share their passwords with one another. So you want to make sure that you have all new passwords for everything.
How would you recommend someone document or organize important information?
Everybody's sense of organization is different. What would be ideal, right? So if there were, God forbid, a divorce sometime in the future, it would be amazing if my clients had everything saved on their computer or on a drive somewhere where they had all their financial records recorded from pretty much from the date of marriage until the date they come to me, by name of banks, what type of account, if it's a checking or savings, if it was an investment account, a retirement account, and certainly from the date of marriage. I would certainly want to have a statement from the date of their marriage, as well as the more current statements, tax returns, if they have any corporations or companies or businesses that may have been started, if they received any huge gifts, if they own a home, documentation with regard to any type of improvements or renovations that may have been made during their marriage, and documentation as to who contributed those funds and how was it paid for. So this would be an ideal world. Most people don't save these type of things or organize them in that sort of way. But if I had my dream, client of people came to me extremely organized with everything on a platter, but it's I rarely ever have that situation where everything's all available and organized. But if I had my druthers, that would be the type of client that would make my life a lot easier.
Okay, so here's the big question, Sabra. What does the divorce process actually look like?
That's a great question. It's also difficult to answer, but generally speaking, if somebody's getting divorced, you can only be divorced by a judge. The judge is the only way that you can get divorced in New York. So whichever way people choose to get divorced, ultimately there will need to be paperwork that's prepared and submitted to a court. A judge will need to review it and sign off on it, right? But there's so many different ways that people can go about that, right? They can go to dinner and scribble something on a napkin and find me or some other attorney and say, you know what, we worked everything out, draft this up for us, and we want to submit our papers as an uncontested divorce. Great, that's a possibility. I don't think it happens very often, but it's certainly a possibility. Other ways is the common way, like you hate each other, lawyer up, and you start the divorce proceeding immediately. So a summons and complaint needs to be started and filed in court, and the other person has to get served with the papers, and then the rest continues. So the rest continues. It can be through negotiation with the counsel or motion practice. If you're not agreeing upon things, somebody make a motion which you moving the court, telling the court, we don't know what to do in this issue, and judge, we want you to decide and tell us what to do. So there's certain areas that need to be decided in every divorce. And so either the two of you figure it out and you tell the judge, this is what we've decided on these issues, or the judge has to decide these issues either through motion practice or ultimately a trial. So if there's a trial, you'll have to testify in court. You may bring witnesses, evidence, all of the traditional things that happen in a trial. And then after the trial is done, your attorney will likely have to produce something called trial briefs, which can take many hours to prepare. And after all of that is submitted, the judge will review it and then make the decision on all the different issues that were presented to them to decide and grant the divorce based upon that.
Okay. How long does this process usually take?
So that's like the famous question I get asked all the time. People call me, they're like, how long is this going to take? And it's very challenging for me to answer that because I don't know that situation. I don't know the other side. I don't know how cooperative everyone will be. Even for couples that I work with who are coming to me as a mediator to mediate their divorce, it's difficult for me to answer because I don't know. Are they the type of people to be agreeable? Are they reasonable? Are they prepared? Do they have their documents in order? Have they thought through what they want so that they can come to the table and we can have a discussion and a conversation around the different issues, and then we can figure out where everybody lands on them, right? So that's just to resolve the issues. Now it needs to be put into paperwork. and then submit it to a court. So it usually takes a couple of weeks, depending upon how busy the office is, to put together, let's say, settlement papers. You put that together, they need to be reviewed by both sides, and then submitted to the judge. Once it's submitted to the judge, I call it the divorce packet. So once we submit that packet to the court, now it's really questionable how long does it take. And I find that it varies from county to county, whether you're downstate, like in Queens or Brooklyn, Manhattan. I find that it takes longer for the courts to resolve the papers because there's so many more filings. It's just very, very busy courts down here, as opposed to if I have a family that's upstate New York where it's not as populated, there's not as many filings, their paperwork is more likely to get processed a lot quicker and sooner. Sometimes if it's a litigated case and the judge had said, okay, submit your papers, I'll make your case as a priority and we'll look at the paperwork, then you'll kind of have an indication from that judge about how long it might take. So just generally speaking, it's hard for me to give an answer how long it takes from the time someone says, okay, I want to get divorced, and the fact that they'll be granted the divorce.
So why do some divorces last longer than the marriage? That's
a great question. Yeah. So you're talking about, marriages that are maybe, under 5 years or under 10 years, and somehow their divorces last years and years and years. I just met someone the other day, their divorce has been going on for 11 years without really knowing their specific situation and why. It's hard for me to answer. It could be that somebody started the process and then they didn't do anything. They just sat around and nobody made any movement one way or the other to do anything or to tell the court to do anything. However, there are certain aspects of a case that once it gets to a certain point where a judge is assigned and there's certain conferences that happen before the court then is kind of going to steer them toward a trial and ultimately to get this finished. Most cases don't go to trial, but if you're not going to decide, then the judge is going to schedule you for trial, and then your options are either to go to trial or find a way to settle before your trial date. So I'm finding that a lot more cases that are in that boat where they have a judge assigned and then they have that conference that sets up all their dates, those cases move a little bit more quickly. But even with moving more quickly, it still takes time because discovery takes a while. You have to produce all this documentation. Then there's a chance to file a deficiency notice that they didn't provide everything. Maybe you have to subpoena some of the records. That takes time. And then even if you're scheduled for trial, the courts are very busy. So depending upon your judge, they may not have trial dates. I have some judges tell me they have no trial dates available until 2026. So that's another reason why the cases are extended out so far. And then even when we get to the trial dates, things happen. The courts say something came up and they can't keep those dates. They have to give you other dates. So there's a whole variety of reasons. There's no black and white answer as to why the cases take so long. But the ones that take like a really long time, like over 7 years or more than that, usually it's the parties. There's something going on there. There was some sort of delay for whatever the reason.
The next question is, what should people expect emotionally and financially when they file for divorce?
So emotionally, I don't typically ask my clients like how they're feeling through things about the divorce. I could tell or I could feel certain things like energetically depending upon what's going on. Like if there's some sort of abuse going on, sure, that's kind of obvious. But in terms of a common thing that I see is right before we're about to settle all the issues, somebody starts hesitating. And I think there's something in that moment that it's becoming real. Like they kind of got used to and comfortable with the fact, okay, the divorce was filed. We're going through negotiations. We have to do discovery. Our lawyers are talking. But there's something about when they have that final settlement agreement that makes it final, like their signature on that document, where there tends to be either like last minute stuff, but wait, what about this? Or wait, what about that? Or a hesitation to sign. I see that coming up for people because now it's becoming really real. And They may have like almost like a buyer's remorse. Like, are they making the right decision? Or this is really the best outcome for me? Those types of questions. I know, in my own situation for me, I was very excited and happy. Like I felt like I was turning over a new leaf. I had a fresh new start, a new beginning, second chance at life, so to speak.
Wow.
And so it was more of an exciting time for me because for me, I was much younger and, my marriage was much shorter and I didn't have children with him. And so I felt the shackled, so to speak, by him because I didn't have my freedom to go out and date and meet the right person. And so here I was being granted back my freedom so that I could be free to do and live my life how I wanted to without concern over my decisions and whether, there's an impact with respect to him or, does he get a say in what I'm doing and things like that. So I think the emotional, it's a roller coaster. I wrote a book at one point on my website that talked about the 7 stages of divorce, which mirrors the 7 stages of grief. And so you go through the denial and the anger and you go through all the different emotions and the feelings. And I think that everybody goes through those emotions at some point in the process. Some people go through it way more quicker than the other. And oftentimes when you're going through the process of divorce and one party is not really kind of coming along for the ride and you feel like you're dragging them through this process because they're not there yet. Either in complete denial, like this isn't really happening, so they don't want to address it, or they're angry, or there's some emotion going on that's preventing them from dealing with what needs to be dealt with in the moment. And so, unfortunately, you either wait for the person to catch up to where you're at, or there may have to be other more aggressive actions taken. And when I say aggressive, I mean legally speaking. We may have to follow certain motions to kind of force the person to do this next step that we need to do in the process. And following the legal course and the legal system.
Mm-hmm. And financially, when it comes to a lawyer, what fees should they anticipate?
Sure. So when you're considering filing for divorce, you need to have some money set aside.
Wow.
You need to be ready to pay what's called a retainer. Every law firm has a retainer that they require just to get started on their proceeding. You may be in a situation where maybe your spouse is the moneyed spouse and they really need to pay your legal fees because you're not working. Maybe you're a stay-at-home parent. There's lots of different scenarios, but you really need to have access to funds to just get the process started. And if you don't have that available, that can stymie your ability to hire a law firm or to move forward. It'll certainly make things a little difficult in being able to hire the lawyer of your choice. I think every person is entitled to choose a law firm and a lawyer that they feel comfortable working with. But unfortunately, divorce does not come cheap, and you need to be prepared. But hopefully in your situation, it'll be temporary. So you'll have this certain period of time that you'll have some legal bills that you need to pay, and then once things are resolved, that bill goes away and you just can continue on your life.
Are you able to disclose just the ballpark of how much that would be?
I think industry standard, I've seen a lot of law firms are charging anywhere between $5,000 to as much as $15,000 for an initial retainer to get started. And again, I can't speak for every law firm, but most law firms are charging hourly for their time. And so they'll have attorneys are obvious ones, right? So depending upon whether it's a partner or an associate attorney at the firm, they'll be at different rates. There's usually a paralegal, there may be a legal assistant, and they're usually billed out at different rates. Mm-hmm. So you can expect, at least from my firm, you would receive a bill from us every month, which will detail who is working on your file, what did they do, who actually did the work, and what their rate is, and how much time they spent on it. And so this way, you'll know exactly how your money is being managed and what it's being spent on.
All right, what is the difference between a contested and uncontested divorce?
I love this question, actually. So uncontested divorce essentially means, in most circumstances, you both agree upon everything. Now, that doesn't mean that from day one you both agreed upon everything and you signed and the paperwork, although that would be great. That's definitely an uncontested divorce. If you went for mediation or did a collaborative divorce, and neither of you had filed yet for court, nothing's really going on in court, then when you prepare all your paperwork, it's going to be an uncontested divorce because you work together through mediation or a collaborative method of divorcing, and you're signing the document that documents all of the decisions you made in that process. So that's an uncontested divorce. There are circumstances in which you may hire separate attorneys, and your attorneys will negotiate a settlement. And again, as long as it's done fairly quickly, that can be filed as an uncontested divorce. A contested divorce is sort of obvious. There's all sorts of motion practice, filing for contempt, filing for a declaration that one party has to pay counsel fees. Maybe you're filing a motion for exclusive use and occupancy of the home. Maybe you're seeking an order of protection against the other party. There's a lot of different things that could happen in a divorce that would make it contested. It essentially means that we don't agree on these issues that need to get resolved in our divorce, and you have to file a motion and get the judge involved. So that's clearly not an uncontested divorce. That is a contested divorce. You'll have two different positions on a particular issue.
Sabra, what's the role of mediation, and when does that work best?
So mediation can be worked or used in a lot of different circumstances. I love mediation. I think that if every couple who considers divorce would at least give mediation a try, I think that more couples can get through the divorce process a lot quicker. They can also arrive at decisions in their divorces together without having to involve the court, without involving a complete stranger to decide the outcome of their life, right? Because that's essentially what they're doing. When you say, I can't decide, or we can't figure out what to do with our kids, or we can't figure out what to do with our money or with our house, you're telling this stranger who doesn't know you, hey, tell us what to do with our stuff, apply the law, and whether you like the outcome or not. And so in mediation, the two of you get to discuss together with a professional all of the different issues in a divorce, and you get to come to an agreement together. If there's no agreement, then clearly that issue is still unresolved and you need to continue working through it. If the mediation is working for you, you continue doing that. There are some times where people may start out the divorce process in a contentious way, but then come to realize, you know what, maybe we can reach an agreement on this issue or that issue. Oftentimes with children, the custody issues, maybe a place that they can reach an agreement on because they both love their children, right? And so they may be able to come to a consensus on that, but with regard to the finances, they need help of the lawyers, or they need to hear from a judge to decide an answer with regard to the financial aspect. So I do see some couples, they'll use mediation to resolve their issues concerning their kids and their children, custody decisions, visitation, who's making decisions with respect to the children, how does that all work out? And then they'll come to the attorneys, we'll help them figure out the financial piece. So those are a couple different ways that mediation can work really well. I had a couple that came to me for a mediation, divorce mediation, and they were so ready. Both of them were done. They want this marriage over, and they came to me, and as I was getting to know both of them and asking them questions, I learned that they had two children. They had an older daughter. When I say older, maybe she was high school age. Don't remember now. It's a long time ago. And they had a son. The son had severe autism. Mm-hmm. The daughter was healthy. She was planning to go to college, maybe even talking about medical school. But the son needed a lot of help and a lot of services. And the husband was out there working all the time. And the mother, the wife, was always complaining that the father's never home. He doesn't help around the house. He doesn't help with their child who needs all this time and attention. And she's out there, driving him here from this specialist to that specialist and dealing with, his behavior and whatever was happening with this son. And over the course of the marriage, at some point, the mother went out to go get a license as a real estate agent to try to bring in more money into the home. But because of all the distractions and all the efforts that she had to put in with regard to their son, who needed a lot of time and attention, it was difficult for her to go out and show property and make money doing that or bring in more. And so there was this tug of war here, where dad is out there working so hard, doing whatever he can to bring in money to pay for and support this family and the lifestyle that they have and whatever the needs of their son were. And then there's the mother who's also contributing to the marriage and to the family and running around and driving their kid from here to there. Now, neither one of them on their own could bring in the money and also drive their child all over the place to all these different appointments. But together, they were a family, and their world, this is what it looked like. And it required everybody had their role and everybody had some responsibilities and things to do. And when I showed them, and all I did was repeat back to them what they were sharing with me. And they started to appreciate. He didn't appreciate what she was doing, and she didn't appreciate what he was doing. That's why he was out working so hard, bringing home money to support them and their lifestyle and their child. And after I kind of shared what I was observing with them, they both looked at each other and they looked at me, and they said they're not coming back, that they were going to try to work on the relationship. So it was like, really brings tears to my eyes just talking about it. But that's one of the situations. I didn't plan on keeping them together. But, all I did was just show them, or one of the concepts that I learned when I was trained as a mediator, to mirror back. And all I was doing was mirroring back exactly what they were sharing with me. And that's how they received it, was that they forgot to appreciate each other. They forgot about that. They weren't seeing it. They both were seeing what they were doing and what they were working so hard at, and the other person wasn't appreciating it. We have a child with an illness who requires a lot of attention and care. It's those, for some reason, it puts so much stress and pressure on the marriage and on the relationship. And again, like in this story I just shared, it takes away from them being able to give attention to each other. And so, think about it. Two people get together, they plan to build a life together. Part of the life that they want to build is they want to bring children into the family and raise a family together. They plan on the kids growing up, moving out of the house. Their kids are going to get married, and they're going to be grandparents. And so at some point, it's just going to be the two of them again. And so they've decided to create this whole life together. But if somewhere along the way, they're not interacting with one another, they get so focused and like laser focused on just their role and what they're doing, but they're not appreciating the other parent, or the other partner, I should say. You wind up in a situation, from, again, what I observe, and again, I'm not a therapist, I have no license or whatsoever, you wind up in a situation where you're looking at a stranger across the table from you. So what I've learned over the years, it's so important to not forget that relationship that first started and created this whole entire family that you created together. Like, where did you all begin? And not to forget the friendship that you have with one another. And you got to maintain that throughout, even with all the struggles and even with whatever's going on with your children and everything else. You still have to maintain that friendship and kindness with one another. I'm sure it's very, very difficult. It requires a lot of work. And I don't think people plan. They certainly don't plan for that, but I also don't think that people talk about it. There's books out there that ask you, what's 101 questions that you ask your partner before you get married. Great books. And some of the questions in there are hypotheticals. Like, what if we have a child that has this disability? What would you do? And how would you manage that? What if one of us winds up in debt? We make a poor business decision and this happens or that happens. So there's all these hypotheticals that I don't think people talk about with one another and really get to know each other on that level. Because while things are great and happy, they're great and happy, and that's easy. It's the hard stuff. It's the challenges that, you need to both be on the same page about, in terms of how you're going to handle it and how you're going to be a team together to weather the storms.
Incredible. Sabra, how do you deal with difficult people that come and want your services, and maybe they have a difficult spouse?
So I deal with difficult people every day. I think that's my job. But primarily my focus is on my clients. So if they're having a freak out moment, or they're the one who's angry and they're saying or planning to do certain things, I don't know how I figured it out, but a lot of my clients will tell me, like, wow, like, you have a soothing voice, or like, you're like this voice of reason. And I don't know, have a way of talking with them to help them process or understand what they're feeling and what they're thinking, or help them understand that if they were to continue down this path, what might happen or what could happen or what could be the outcome, if things happen a certain way or whatever it is that they're saying or doing, or what could be a better possibility if perhaps maybe they, put their energies in a different direction.
Speaking of children, what can people do to protect their kids during a split?
It's a great question. I think that depending upon the age of your children, number one, I think it's important to shield your children from the divorce and whatever's going on in divorce. I think, in my opinion, that children just need to know that they are okay, that they are loved, and they will always have a roof over their head and parents who love them.
And it's not their fault.
And it's not their fault, exactly. So I think those are key, and that message would be best conveyed, especially if it's the first time you're telling the children, that you do it together. Also, depending upon the age, and again, I'm not a therapist. I don't know from a therapist perspective, but only from being a divorce attorney for over 25 years, I kind of picked up a few things here and there. I know that there are a number of books out there. I've actually put together a whole bunch on my Amazon account that I share with my clients so they can pick and choose various books that seem age appropriate, whether they have young children, whether they have adolescents or teenagers. How do you broach the subject of divorce with their kids? If you and your spouse don't know how to bring it up, those books are a great talking piece where you can read the book with your child, and then you have to leave space and time so that if the child has questions that you can answer them. You don't want to read the book and then leave the room. You want to read the book and have space and time to answer their questions and their concerns and help them just process and understand what's happening. It's also a good idea that if you're in the middle of a divorce where you are going to court, your children shouldn't know what is happening in court. Like, this is adult stuff. Your kids are kids. They're children. They really should be shielded from this stuff. And until the divorce is finished or resolved, you don't know either what the outcome's going to be. You may have a temporary orders or temporary things that are happening. Sure, those, if they impact the children, they need to know about it. If they're spending time with dad on these days and time with mom on these other days, of course, they need to know about these things. Or if they need to make certain phone calls with a parent or a video call, those are important for the children to know about. But in terms of, the technical things and legal things and when they have a court appearance, the children don't need to be involved or know about that.
One thing I want to say about that is when you have parents that are so involved in their divorce, they don't realize what goes on with their children. And when I was working as a classroom teacher, we would see it in the classroom, all those little things that parents would say, kids are resilient. It comes out one way or the other. So if it's not processed properly, it really leaves a mark.
Certainly. If you see that your child is not adapting well, they're having difficulty. I've had a number of clients have their children in schools, as certain schools had programs for children specifically of parents that are going through divorce. And it sounded like a wonderful program and really great, so the kids can relate and talk with other children around their age with the same feelings or whatever they're going through with a professional that can help address those concerns. And in other circumstances, maybe they need their own private therapist to deal with certain things. Again, every situation is different. One type of family and one way of doing things is not necessarily what applies across the board to every family.
Do you have any advice for people re-entering the dating world post-divorce?
Great. So I have some opinions on that. I don't know if they're controversial or not, but like one of my opinions is that, you're really not ready to date until the divorce is finalized, meaning that not just that you and your spouse signed the settlement papers, but also that the judge signed off on your divorce and declared you divorced. And my rationale behind it is that I'm very spiritual, and so I feel like you're still connected with that person, and you're connected with them legally too. And while many people do date while they're going through divorces, it's very common. I can only speak for myself. I obviously can't speak for other people, but in my situation, my divorce was over pretty quickly. But even still, I didn't feel like ready or wanting to meet somebody else while I was going through the divorce process. I didn't feel like I was a whole person, that there was a piece of me that I was kind of broken, right? And you're kind of I had always described it like a sense of like purgatory, because you're legally married, but you don't feel like you're married because you're going through a divorce, but you're not divorced and you're not single. And so like there's this like purgatory type of place, because not heaven, not hell, right? And so it's hard to figure out how to be in that space. Like we all know, or we have an idea how to be in marriage. We know how to be single, right? But how do you be in this space that's not single and, I don't know, you don't feel like you're married anymore? It's a weird place to be, because you're not available if things should work out with a new partner. You're not available to get married again because you're still married to your spouse. And so my advice, whether your divorce is over in 6 months or your divorce takes many, many years, you need time to heal. It's a trauma. It's okay to see a therapist. It's okay to talk to a life coach. Try to rediscover who you are. Go out, try new things. I, as a woman, like I went out, got my hair colored for the first time after my divorce, just tried different things and tried to look a little different, maybe spruce up your wardrobe a little bit. Go for massages, or, just take care of yourself and find yourself again. Trying new things and activities, making new friends, just doing different things kind of slowly over time. And nowadays there's so many different ways to date, right? There's all these dating apps. There's these speed dating things that you could do in person. You could do them online. And so you can gingerly give this stuff a try, to get yourself back out there, start interacting with other people again, and, seeing whether you're excited to meet new people and take somebody on a date or go on a date with somebody, without the expectations like, I have to meet that right special someone. And hopefully if that's what you're looking for, you'll find that again. But, at the beginning, like soon after the divorce, I find, to me, I would think that you need some space and time to like figure out again who you are again, and then figure out what broke down, why didn't the marriage work out, really kind of process all of that. Where are the things where I was great and I showed up amazing, like a really great partner, and where were the places that maybe I'm a little weak and I could have done better, and maybe you want to do better in those areas in the future. Or what are the things in a partner that didn't work for you? Do they still not work for you? And maybe you're going to look for a different type of partner. So I believe in doing a lot of inner work and inner thinking and figuring out who you are, and also figure out what you want and what type of partner that you want to have.
Thank you. And it's also important to be kind to the person you're going on a date with, to disclose that information that you are still going through a divorce. Just to be considerate. Sabra, what would you say to someone who actually feels ashamed or scared about ending their marriage?
That's also another really big question. It's a great question because I think it touched upon a lot of different things. Some people are more religious. I think if you're a religious person, there may be a lot of those feelings of shame and guilt. You'd made this commitment, took these vows, and you're supposed to abide by them, right? There's certain rules and obligations and expectations, and now you're not, right? So I get that. But on the other hand, I could say to a person who says that, it'll be easy for me to say, but maybe harder for them to accept. You're in a boat with lots of similar, amazing, great people like yourself who are unfortunately going through the same process or went through the same process, so you're not alone. So you're definitely not alone. There's a lot of places that you can go to, maybe some group therapy or other groups online. I don't know if people are familiar with meetup.com, but there's a lot of different groups that you can find with all different types of interests and backgrounds. And maybe you could find a group there of people who are either going through a divorce or went through a divorce, and you can, pick their brain or share with them what your fears and your concerns are, to help process those thoughts, or speak to a therapist about why you're feeling that way. But I get it. being scared, yeah, because what's going to happen? Like, you have this life that you've been living that is familiar to you, and now you're stepping into the unknown. You're stepping into this unfamiliar territory. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for your future? If you have children, what does it mean for them? You may feel guilt over that. Like, are you ruining their lives, by making this choice? Are you being selfish because you're unhappy and now, you're ending a marriage and the other parent and affecting the other parent and the children. So there's a lot to unpack there. I certainly wouldn't judge you. I don't think many people would judge a person going through that. And if you're feeling that it's really an internal struggle that you're going through, and perhaps speaking to a professional or somebody who's been through it can help you process that and find a way to be okay with it, or to accept it, or find some kindness in that decision, because whether it was your decision or your partner's decision, if this is on the road to happening, it's going to happen. And so rather than fighting it, finding a way to accept it would certainly be the easier course.
Thank you. Okay, so Sabra, in the religious world, there are two parts to a divorce. There is what they call the get, the religious divorce, and then there's a civil divorce. How do you navigate that when someone comes to you with that? And is everyone who is civilly married religiously married, and everyone who's religiously married civilly married?
So I want to expand the question a little bit more. So when you're talking about a get, you're talking about a Jewish religious marriage that happened, but there's also people of other religions, like there's Catholic and Christian weddings, there's Indian weddings, there's Islamic weddings, and they also have rules around divorce and divorcing procedures. In New York, we actually have a statute that was passed. I think it was influenced by the Jewish community, and to protect women specifically with respect to the get, that essentially says you have to remove all barriers to remarriage. So that's one of the terms in order to get civilly divorced in New York, is that you have to remove all barriers to remarriage. So in a Jewish situation, a woman cannot get remarried if the man did not give her a get. And so in theory, if the man doesn't give her a get, then New York State wouldn't be able to grant the divorce, the civil divorce. In terms of practice, I haven't had much to deal with that specifically, but certainly if there is a religious component, if a couple was married religiously, then yes, they'll need to go to their religious people and get divorced religiously, as well as go to the New York courts to get civilly divorced. It's possible that you can get religiously married and not civilly married, depending upon the person who's marrying you. You have to find out from them whether you applied for a certificate of marriage. If you didn't apply for a certificate of marriage, you have to literally ask the state of New York, or say, we want to get married, and you fill out certain forms and paperwork, and you get a certificate that gives you a window of time to get married. And then once you are married, then the officiants who officiated your wedding would send in the certain paperwork to the state, and then you'd get your certificate of marriage, which would document the fact that you got civilly married. And in terms of the religious aspect, you'd have to speak with your clergy person about exactly how that works, and get all your proper paperwork in order religiously, and the same thing with respect to divorce. So some religions, I don't think they grant divorces, but again, you'd have to speak with a clergy person about that.
I was under the impression that if you are married religiously, you're automatically married civilly.
So there is a concept in the law that says that if your marriage was valid where entered into, is valid everywhere. But I do believe, from my experience with some people that I've spoken with, where they intentionally only got religiously married and didn't do the civil marriage. I don't know the exact reasons why, but I think most people, when they get religiously married, they also do the civil marriage at the same time. I think it's very rare that people would intentionally choose to only get religiously married. I couldn't speak to why.
Is there such a thing as common law marriage in New York?
New York does not. I get asked that question a lot. There's a misconception, because there are some states that do recognize common law marriage. New York is not one of them. So if you are dating somebody or with someone or living with someone for X amount of years, for the rest of your life in New York, you will not ever be considered common law marriage. We don't recognize that in New York. If you want to get married to somebody, you have to intentionally get married. You have to intentionally apply to the state of New York for a certificate to get married, and then actually show up before an officiant and have them marry you. That's the only way to be married. So it's not like a surprise. We're suddenly married and now we're going to get divorced and divide up our assets this way and that way if things don't work out. There's no surprise. In New York, you have to intentionally get married.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for such a rich conversation. This is a lot of information that was so beneficial and so relevant. Where could people find you and keep tabs on your book that's coming out?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. It's been so wonderful to be here, and I'm just excited to be part of your podcast and the work that you're doing. So my office is located in Midtown Manhattan. We have a website. The name of my firm is Sabra Law Group. So the website is sabralawgroup.com. And we're located just outside of Times Square, just north of Bryant Park on 6th and 43rd. The office number is 646-472-7971. We'd be happy to work with you and talk with you if you have any questions. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, which is now X, and a TikTok account.
Do you have an Instagram account?
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, please look out for her book, The Harmonious Divorce. And that's it for this episode of StreetSmarts MBA. If something clicked for you today, please share this episode with a friend, leave a review, and make sure to subscribe. If there's something every adult should know or a topic you wish someone had taught you sooner, please drop us a line at StreetSmarts MBA. And until next time, thank you so much.